Yeah, should be all good. Okay, so welcome guys. It's our first online event with Trine. For those of you who are first time here, we have been running the chatbots and RP events for the last 5 years across different countries. Mostly it was Sydney in Australia, a few meetups in Melbourne, and 5 meetups in Singapore, a few meetups in Hong Kong. So now it all stopped because of the COVID-19 and they can't travel anymore. But I think it's worthwhile trying it to do online. And actually it's funny because online you can be at many places at the same time. So it looks like a bit of a magic. So I always wanted to try how it can work. So yeah, let's see. We'll test if there are any technical challenges for us and if the participation can be at the same level as we can do it face-to-face. Maybe we'll try to test some breakout rooms. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. There are a few things about our meetups that I think always important to highlight. The first one, so we have 3 pillars of it. The first one, that it's an open meetup. It's open for everybody. It's created for practitioners. We are all sharing our real life experience. So it's not a marketing event where we're talking only about how good things are. This is an event for practitioners, by practitioners, where we're actually talking about the challenges, about the real results, about problems we had, and failures are welcomed as well, because that's how we can learn. And we truly believe that the only way to really progress in your career, in your skills, in areas of your interest, is to share what you've learned with others. Few principles that we use that even if chatbots have been in this space for quite a while, we still don't know a lot about them. I don't think there is a lot of the good books about the chatbots and the good recipes how to do it. So we're all learning together in the process. And we'd like it to be a safe environment where everybody can talk. And even if you think that you don't have like public speaking skills or something, it's not important for us. What is important is the experience that you guys can share with us. So please speak up and let's discuss. And if you would like to speak at our next events, just feel free to reach out to me, and it will be really, really great. I want to acknowledge the team around this who helped with this organization. So Bora, Dennis, Peter, like really without you, there won't be events about chatbots, right? Because it's just too difficult to create these events. And you can see that in RP space where I'm doing it alone, I haven't had a meetup for like 4 or 5 months now, because it's very difficult to put up a proper agenda together and find the speakers. So really, really thank you guys. And yeah, let's see how far we can go with this one. And I want to thank EPAM for support of my initiatives, because I have to spend some time on that and they have support from my employer. And very important that I want to thank every member of our community who decided to invest their time, because the time is the most precious thing. And I hope it will work out for you well. So today we are going to talk about finding opportunities in the chatbots, building a business case in the chatbots, and gaining the momentum of the chatbots. And we're having 2 presentations from the practitioners. And then we will be having a Q&A sessions after each of the presentations and towards the end of our event. So the first speaker we have is Matt Sherwood. Matt is a product owner lead in IAG. He's enthusiastic about the chatbots, and he's running basically the chatbot practice at ING. Matt shared some interesting information about him, about releasing over 20 products in 3 years, and then he was able to accelerate it to releasing 10 products in just 1 year. So it's like really amazing speed, Matt. So let's figure out what we can learn from you. And yep, let's welcome Matthew to our discussion. So I'm stopping share, Matt.
Oh, thanks.
Sharing. Thanks.
Yeah, I was quite lucky actually with all those product releases. It's normally everyone else that, you know, puts all the hard work in, which is really good. So I'm sure everyone knows that. So it probably busts me up a little bit better than, you know, usual. So can everyone see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm really excited to be here and talk to you guys a bit about I guess gaining momentum and just gaining some support in general around products, and particularly within the chatbot realm itself. So I'll sort of talk through some of the things that I've learned throughout the I guess last couple of years when it comes to just building any sort of momentum and getting support from product. And some of it is I guess common sense, others are a little bit different, but I thought I might mix it up and make it a little bit quick, a little bit different to sort of explain my learnings as well. Oh, is it going to change? Yep, there we go. So there's three sort of themes that I'm going to be talking about. The first is some things that's helped me with my mindset and things that I've found have been helpful in regards to that. The second one is collaboration, and we all know how important it is to work with others. So there's some little tips and tricks around what I look for when I'm trying to find out how to get something done together. And then the last one is just talking about some experiments and some quick wins. And we'll be using Cats the movie as an example. So if you guys have seen Cats the movie, that's really great. If not, that's also really great. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just to talk about me a little bit, and I'll try not to talk too much about myself because I do have a huge ego and I like feeding it and I like talking a lot about myself. So I'll try to keep it short. But pretty much I've been a product owner for over 4 years. And before that, I tried to run a startup as well, which was a really good learning experience. So for those who don't know, William Hill is one of the UK's biggest wagering companies. So I think about 3 years ago, they entered the Australian market and they bought over Tom Waterhouse, Centrebet, and a couple of other brands and sort of amalgamated. So I used to look after the sports team and the sports portfolio there. Also released their rewards program, which we did in 6 weeks somehow, which was insane. And then looked after some of the diversification stuff, so new products. So that was really interesting, and I'll sort of touch on that a little bit later. And currently I look after the chatbot at IAG. For those who don't know, IAG is one of Australia's biggest insurers, and we currently have brands such as NRMA, which is one of New South Wales' most biggest one, and other companies like RACV and a couple of companies in New Zealand. So insurance is really a great move to move from a gaming company to an insurance company. I think it's really exciting. And then, yeah, just a little bit about my mantra. I try to do things a bit the hard way. So some context around this talk that I'm going to go through, and I'm definitely open to any questions at the end. But this is specifically what's worked for me. So like Pavel said earlier, I don't have all the answers, but I'm just going to share what worked for me and what didn't work for me. So if you find one or two things out of this talk that you find useful, I think that's pretty good. I'll be talking about it from a perspective as if you're driving the chatbot. So you found an initiative and you want to drive it and you want to push it through the business. So I'll be talking from that perspective, as well as more so from a large organization where there's heaps of people, heaps of politics to play around and such. So those are just some things I wanted to set up before we go there. I did mention that I wanted to talk about myself before, so I'm going to talk about my trip to Contact Center Week. For those who don't know, Contact Center Week was a conference that was hosted in February. And it was around how you could, I guess, make the experience a lot better for your customers and a lot better for your frontline staff. And I was actually invited to run a workshop. So I actually was really excited. So I just flew up and did it with my own time and no money, which was really cool. So I'll be talking about it, my experience, just the flight experience, not the actual workshop that I was involved in. Just the experience on my flight, because it's a pretty interesting one. It's a really funny story to tell. So bear with me, because what you're about to see is some of my Snapchat stories and my sort of experience throughout the, I guess, the night, I guess you could say. So pretty much I was sitting at the airport and we got an announcement and we go, okay, the flights are delayed. I was like, okay, not too bad. It's like, oh, yeah, but it's, you know, pretty funny. So just sitting there, everyone's sort of sitting there complaining like, oh God, what's going to happen? And about 20 minutes later, there was a big ruckus and there was a lot of people complaining. I'm not going to talk about which company it was, because, you know, stuff happens, right? So it's not a big deal. But yeah, about 20 minutes later, we got a message that said the flight was cancelled. Just to put in perspective, this was about 5:30 p.m. at night. I'd booked in a hotel that the conference was being run at, so that way I could wake up and do it, because it's 9 a.m. the next day, right? So it was cancelled and go, oh, crap. Okay, well, that's okay. I believe they can move it to tomorrow. So it's like, okay, let's see what other flights they have available. And as you can see here, there was no other flights available. So I was like, oh, geez, what am I going to do? So a lot of the people around me decided to move off, and they're like, oh, screw this. I'm going to ask for a refund. Let's just book another hotel. Let's demand they move us to another flight. Me, I sort of took a step back and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do from here? So I thought, okay, well, I'll go to Flight Center and I'll try and figure out if there's any other flights to the Gold Coast. Unfortunately, no, all booked out. Then I sat down and thought, well, Brisbane is in Queensland. Gold Coast is in Queensland. So I'll just book a flight to Brisbane. So that's exactly what I did. And I sort of have a weird mindset. So whenever things get harder, I sort of get a little bit more excited. So you'll notice that in some of my stuff as well. So booked a flight to Queensland, and I was speaking to some people and go, guys, from Brisbane, how do I get to the Gold Coast? I go, there's a train station. I go, great. So I arrived to Brisbane at 10 p.m. Get to the train station, it's closed. Oops. So then I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'll go speak to a taxi and figure out how much the taxi is going to cost. And the taxi guy goes, oh, it's about $200. I was like, what? $200? I'm like, yeah, or you can try Uber. I'm like, how much would be with Uber? $180. I'm like, what? $180? So then I decided to keep walking down, and eventually I found a pilot who actually just came off one of these flights. It goes, guys, is there any cheaper way to get to Queensland? To get to the Gold Coast? And they go, and just as I said that, a shuttle bus pulled up and they go, see that little stand right there? And I go, yeah. They go, go talk to that stand right now. They can get you to the Gold Coast for $50. So I did that, ran to the stand and said, wait, paid the guy $50, got my stuff. And I finally got to the Star, which is where it was at 1 a.m. Checked in, went to sleep at I think about 1:30, and got up at 7 a.m. So pretty hectic trip, right? So why am I talking about that? Is when you're building a product, and especially with chatbots, because it's so new, you're always going to have so many hurdles and bumps that, you know, you may have encountered before, you may not have encountered. And some things that I find that have helped me so far is just changing the questions you ask yourself. You know, along that trip to Queensland, I could have said, why is this happening to me? How am I going to get my money back from this flight company? But instead I thought, okay, well, what's the next thing I could do? What's the next thing I could do? Should think about that the same way when it comes to Chatbot. What's my purpose again there? What's realistic? Well, I wasn't going to be able to get a helicopter there. Set some targets. And then, you know, sort of outlining in my mind, what am I willing to sacrifice? In my case, it was, I couldn't really sacrifice time, so I'd rather sacrifice some money. But also when you're looking at your projects, you may want to have a hurdle that you want to overcome. So you might want to sacrifice some features. You might want to sacrifice, you know, some extra budget that you're probably saving for something else. Or even just sacrificing some of the decisions that you make so you can bring other people on. So some of these examples I'll bring up as well. I think a really good one is sort of legal. And I'll sort of use one of my examples from when I actually worked at William Hill. So it's not exactly chatbot related, but it's quite similar. So we really wanted to have a look at incorporating some card games. We had some feedback that some customers wanted to play things like blackjack, things like higher or lower, and all these, and poker, and all these other things that they wanted to put on. So we built a business case for it, and we brought it to legal, and legal said no. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. For those who don't know, if you're betting on something in Australia, it can't be on a random number generator. So what we did is we stood back and go, well, is there any other way that we can do this that's legal, that doesn't, you know, put us into too much trouble, or etc., but also meet the demands that our customers are asking of us. So one thing that we had a look at was, well, if we did something like, we have markets that you can flip a coin on, which is a 50-50 market. So one of the more popular ones was to have, I guess, a sort of card game where you can guess whether the number is going to be higher or lower. So what we ended up working with legal to do was to figure out, well, if we present this market in the form of a card game, but inform the customer that it is in fact an actual market that you can watch, is that something that we would be able to put in? From there, they were like, yes, we should be able to do that. We'll do some sign off, and then did the sign off, released it, and pushed it off. So that's just another example of, you know, when blockers sort of come up, there's different ways to work around it, and it's usually, you know, not bringing people on the journey. Something a little bit more chatbot related, I'll sort of share my experience with something that we've been working on in terms of authentication on the chatbot. So, and it's really important with security that we're quite careful, especially with all the data privacy stuff that's going around these days. So originally what we wanted to do was have our chatbot to be able to sign in within the actual chat conversations itself. And due to some, I guess, technical restrictions and security restrictions, it's not something that we could do right away. But as you may have noticed from my introduction, I like to do things really fast and get things out really quickly so I can learn a lot faster. So one thing that we're currently doing, and I'm sure a lot of other companies that have chatbot are already doing this, is just to give the customer option to click on the ability to sign in, and then take them to the a login page, get them to log in, and then have our vendor read our cookie and then send it through. So it's just another thing. If you take a step back, change the questions you're asking, it's not really a big deal, and there's other ways to sort of go for it. Now, obviously, if I chose to sort of fight these sort of things, you know, you usually go nowhere. And to be honest, I'm quite stupid in a lot of things. So I find it a lot easier just to collaborate with people. And I'm going to be talking about that next in a little bit of a different fashion. And something that I've been playing a lot recently is RuneScape. If you guys haven't heard of old school RuneScape before, it's an online MMO that you can play. It has about 120,000 active customers that actually pay to play. I think about 80% pay your subscription and 20% go for free, but they end up paying anyway. And you know, there's a couple of different goals that people can do when they play the game. So you can try and reach the maximum stats, which you can see on the left here. That takes about 1,500 to 2,000 hours to do. So it's a very big investment. A lot of people just join so they can play with their friends and kill bosses. And then some of us, you know, join because they just want to look rich and they want to show off. We call that fashionscape. Now in RuneScape, it's a pretty big, pretty big game, and it's been around since 2004, 2001. It was my first MMO, so it was pretty cool. There's a certain area which I've highlighted in red, which is called the wilderness. And if you enter the wilderness, you can get a lot of better stats, a lot of better loot that you can do. But the only catch is if you go in there, other people can kill you. Now, last week, there was something released called Dead Man Mode. And essentially what Dead Man Mode was, everywhere that you go in the game, you will die, except for 10 areas. Now, why would you want to go outside those 10 areas? Well, it takes forever to get your stats up. And to get in the finals, you need to get in the top 2,000. If you leave the safe zones, you get faster stats. But if you die, you lose your levels of experience and you lose your most valuable items, 5 most valuable items. So it's pretty intense. I'm not going to lie. I've been playing it over the weekend. My life has suffered a great result because of it. But damn, I'm addicted to video games. This is what my first day sort of looked like. So I was trying to mine and get some money. This is just a video of some other guy PKing someone or plague killing someone, and I died and obviously lost all my stuff. So how do you actually survive in the game? It's pretty simple. You team up with people, or you can team up with clans. If someone like that attacked me in the mine, then I could call my clan and sort of push it through. And the way that they work is each clan member has their own different role and own different skill. I think there's about 27, which they build up and they protect each other and sort of push it through. So I guess you could see this in the light that, and it's a bit of a hyperbole where if you're not playing nice, that can happen to you when you know, you're working in your business. But it sort of aligns, and I sort of pull it back, I think, with a product mindset and how can I pull everything back to business somehow. It pulls back to how to achieve it. So when I actually, so I've been looking after Chatbot for a couple of months now with an IAG before, you know, doing a few projects with it in the past. And when I moved in there, this is pretty much what I look like. It's just me on my own. There was no dedicated team for it. There wasn't a lot of budget being circulated, and we needed to find a way to sort of gain some momentum around that. So towards the end of March, there's quite a few things I've already been able to do, and I can't say that I've been able to do it alone. I actually don't know how the last product owner was able to do it. She was definitely a lot better at juggling things than I was. But in the last 4 weeks, I've been able to bring one person on as a conversational designer for our claims area. We're also in the works to get a second person in there as well from our call center area. I've got 3 projects approved, whereas in the past I was just 1. And the main thing is we've got a lot of people talking. Now, this might be a coincidence because during this whole COVID period, there's been a lot of shutdown, a lot of work, and the traffic's gone up. But the main thing that I look for to get success and build some momentum is to have a look at the conversations that's actually happening around the business and around different areas, which is a good thing, you know, for your product itself, but it can be a bad thing because you'll definitely notice when people are talking about it due to the endless emails and endless meeting invites. So, you know, there's lots of hats that, you know, I had to wear until I've sort of got those resources, but I'm still looking to sort of build that up. So some of the things that I've found is helpful, and some of the things I look for is to work with what you've got, work with the people around you. So at the moment, our chatbot, it sits within technology. Your chatbot might sit within distribution, so things like the call centers or the web chat teams, etc. But work with the people around you. People are really helpful. People always want to see things get done. And the only time that they'll dismiss things, you would hope, is because they're passionate and they have a different viewpoint. So it's really important that you take a step back and communicate your goals quickly. Clearly, not quickly. But yeah, something else I really look for is, you know, I tend to be a bit selfish when I look at products in the past. So I kind of take a step back and figure out, okay, with the people that I'm trying to work with, what are their goals and what can I actually do to help them achieve it? So it's more of a collaboration. Hey, so for example, if you've got a call center, someone who's in charge of the call center, they might be looking at things of reducing the average handling time. So if you can line up a feature that you would like your chatbot to have that will reduce the average handling time, then there's no reason for you to not go to them and get advice and get some input, whether you have anyone that helps write content or they don't. They'll be more keen to actually work with you and push things through together. Always ask for help and take breaks, please. Like our jobs are quite busy. It's a stressful time. You're stuck at home. Luckily, I don't have kids, but if you have kids, Jesus, I feel really sorry for you guys during this time, but hopefully you're surviving. I'm sure you're all doing well. And the last thing is, back to my sort of first point around the mindset, is to be flexible. You know, a lot of the ideas that we come up with are pretty bad, to be honest. And I'll sort of talk through that in experiments section. But you need to be careful with other ideas that people are generating. You know, you might dismiss them and promote yours. So it's really important to be objective when it comes to that, but also be flexible with the decisions that you want to make. It should be a collaborative process. If someone's got more information about something that, you know, could drive the experience that you're trying to build, I tend to sort of rely on them and go with whatever they believe is right. Some of the KPIs I look with, so these are the different areas that I sort of look at the moment and work really closely with. And these are some of the KPIs that I have in the back of my head when I'm talking to them. And these are something that we discuss quite often is, well, these are my targets and this is what I want to reach. I can see you want to reach X, Y, and Z. Let's work together and build different initiatives like that. I found this really helpful in my organization, mainly because with the way that my company is structured, you get a certain set amount of budget. And at the moment for things like Chatbot, it can kind of be parked to the side in the sense where there's money in bigger investments that are being worked on right now. So being able to align to this will allow you to work together and possibly actually have some funding or portion of the funding from another area to sort of progress through some of the products or ideas that you have. And like I said before, like I'm not perfect, so there's some things that obviously haven't worked out for me in the past, and I sort of alluded to it earlier. That my sort of approach to building products is to get them out really quickly, especially with Chatbot. You know, the more user content and more user feedback that you push out, the more you can learn and the more you can improve things. Something that I've learned the hard way is not everyone can adjust to your speed, and pushing everyone to that speed will actually not only cause you to burn out, but cause a lot of frustration along the journey to sort of push things out. Not communicating enough. This might be partially connected to the working alone portion that I'm about to speak to, But if you're not communicating with your stakeholders every step of the way, what happens? You end up, end up getting question marks. There'll be a whole bunch of distrust, and things will be a lot harder. And again, these are sort of common sense principles that, it's just worth reminding. And then if you're working alone, it's, if you can avoid that, that's probably a better thing to do. I think my biggest mistake, especially when I sort of set out on my product journey, is given that I was driving the vision for things, being able to do little tasks by myself, I was able to move them quite quickly. But what ends up happening is your team feels alienated, and they'll end up, disliking it. And because I haven't been involved in any of these sessions or anything along the way, they'll end up, not really buying into what you want to do. So I've definitely been punished a few times in some of these areas. So I'd probably recommend trying to avoid that. But again, they're sort of common sense sort of things. God, how am I doing for time? I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah,
next thing I want to talk about is experiments. And then towards the end, I'll sort of show you guys a really basic example of things that I throw together in a business case as well. But when I talk about experiments, I usually talk about experiments as like Cambridge University sort of puts in. It's just a test in order to learn something. So when you go back to science, you always have a hypothesis, you have your assumptions, and then you test your assumptions and you find out, who was right. And obviously that's a really powerful tool to use when you get caught in those conversations where one person has opinion and the other person has opinion. You go, well, let's just test it and figure out what's going to happen. It's also really good if you can push some experiments and quick wins in to actually provide some more evidence why you should push things further and why you should actually build capability for whatever you're trying to achieve further. Best way for me to explain this is cats the movie. What? Why are you talking about cats? Well, it's an interesting topic. So for those who don't know, cats, this is a picture of Taylor Swift, who's been transformed into a cat. It still haunts me sometimes when I go to sleep. And for those who don't know, it's a movie that was released, I think, towards the end of last year. And essentially, they brought a whole bunch of big star characters and had a $95 million budget for it. So it's quite entertaining. So yeah, over the December break, things get kind of boring. So my friend called me up and said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" He goes, "Mate, I've been tricked." I go, what are you talking about? And he says, "Oh, well, my girlfriend wanted me to go out and watch Cats the movie. She said it was really cool, really great thing to watch." I go, "Okay, cool. So how'd you find it?" And he replies, "Well, I sat there and I wondered, wow, this is really impressive. How can someone make a movie that is so bloody awful?" I was like, oh my goodness. So based on that natural curiosity, I decided to look at some reviews and movie reviews. That's sort of my guilty pleasure, is to watch movie reviews of sort of bad movies and just have a bit of a laugh. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't go as expected. And this can sort of relate to some of your more bigger products. It was obviously rushed to the Christmas release, like some of the other big projects have a due date that gets rushed to. So bad that no one actually saw the screening. So movie screenings is something that you do prior to get a bit of a sense of how the movie is going to perform. They actually do that until days before it opened. And they even had to do a re-release of the movies because there was human hands in it. You could see wedding rings, like the actors were floating above a texture. So there's a lot of things that needed to sort of be reworked. At its current rate, I think it's set to lose, or already has lost, over $70 million when you include the marketing budget in it. When you compare that to something like 1917, which was released around the same time, it's quite astonishing. So I always like to put my product hat on and think, okay, well, if I was in that position, what are some of the things that I could have done to sort of push towards the business or the sponsors to give examples of why it, it may not work. Some examples of things like movies, and I'll get to chatbots in the next slide as well. Some experiments that you can do is, it's really simple. You can have a look at the YouTube like to dislike ratio. You'll notice there was a whole movement around Sonic the Hedgehog. If anyone's not seen the original trailer, do it at your own caution. But they ended up, based off the YouTube comments and the like ratios, redesigning the whole character, moving the release date 1 month, and the general reviews for it is pretty good. There's something else that you can do which is quite interesting, and it could be an idea for when you're looking to get data for any of your future projects, is sentiment analysis, especially on Twitter. I believe there's a paper, I can't remember exactly where it's located, where they've analyzed different comments on the trailer reactions to determine what the actual projected profit or loss would be. And then there's other really simple things such as guerrilla testing, different surveys and focus groups. So some things chatbot related in terms of experiments that I try and do when I'm doing new products is guerrilla testing, and that's just where you get out of the office and just go talk to someone on the street, which is quite nerve-wracking at the beginning. I find the best way to do that is when you position yourself as, hey, I'm building something for my company. We wanted to get some public opinion. What are your thoughts? I found if you try and say, oh, hey, I work for this company, we're building this thing, can sometimes come off as a sales pitch. But when you say we're looking for opinions, everyone likes to share their opinions. So for some reason, that method kind of works for me. A/B tests is another good way. So, you have a control group and a different group that you can split to say, well, one's the control group, which is nothing, so with no changes, the other with lots of changes. Painted door test, which is where you just have, for example, if we're testing how many people would use a chatbot, which is something that I'm doing now for one of the another brands I'm looking to push on. Just have a button that says something like chat with us. You click on it and it'll say, sorry, Alexa is sleeping right now. And then you just get some data from that. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other things as well. On the previous slide, for some reason, my keyboard isn't working, so I can't go back. But there's a book called Strategize that has over 44 different experiments that you can do. I find these are probably the most useful ones that I've been able to pull out and execute without having too many blockers or costing too much money to sort of go through. And I'll sort of wrap up going through my usual business case. Now, my business cases aren't really that sophisticated, and they don't go into too much detail until the final round. It's sort of like a live document that I use, and I use it more so for discussions and bring out different points. So I usually begin by putting in a problem context. So breaking out what's the problem, and then breaking out the different goals I've found has been quite useful as well. Previously, I used to just use like what's the problem we're trying to solve and what's the goal. But when you split it up by what's the business, the customer, and what's your project trying to do, I found that's quite useful. So an example of if we wanted to do it for like a chatbot, we can say customers are visiting our website. Business goal would be to reduce phone calls. Customer goal would be to answer their questions quickly. Project goal, integrate chatbot on the website. Like pretty simple stuff. Talk through what happens now. So 43% of our customers navigate on average 3 pages around a website before calling us. Currently we have an FAQ page, but it has the highest call forward rate from the website. So this might actually bring up some questions around, well, is chatbot the right thing to do? Or is there a different way that we can reduce phone calls as well? Which is something you always need to question yourself around the effort versus the return. And then you go through what the proposed change is. We want to put blah, blah, blah. And then the evidence. So we talked about experiments in the last section. If I don't have any data or any evidence in terms of why we should do this, I usually just take a step back and go, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do it until we've got some evidence to push through. And having any sort of qualitative data, which is things like surveys and internal interviews, and quantitative data, which is, you know, the pure numbers, backing up any proposed changes with some assumptions around these numbers will really, really help sell and gain motivation, at least from my experience in terms of pushing things along. Here's some fake stats that I've put together. And then the last page, I just put the impact of doing nothing, and then I'll use some assumptions to put some numbers across here around what the potential reduction could be if we did it. So yeah, just more numbers there. So here's some stuff that I use when I get stuck and I don't really have any research. I'll be keen to hear if anyone else within this meetup has any other sources that they go to. I found State of Mobile is really good. That goes through all the download rates for mobile apps, but gives you a good sort of reflection in terms of what customers are using and the sort of direction that people are going in regards to that. I actually find there's a lot of chatbot related information in there, which is pretty cool, especially around the messaging app. So definitely give that a Google. It's free, so you can do that pretty well. Business Insider, I try and read that as much as I can. I'll be honest, with a lot of the Business Insider, the Medium articles, have been quite busy recently, so I haven't really got around to it as much as I like to. But Product Coalition, just from a product manager perspective, is pretty good. Chatbots Magazine has a lot of interesting articles around specifically the UX of it and how to set a tone and stuff, which I've found really helpful. And then the last one, which is something that you're all doing, is go talk to people in the industry and get your lessons. That's where you're going to learn most around that. And yeah, so key takeaways: starts with your mindset, help others so they can help you. Use data everywhere you can get, and yeah, just see what you can do. If you're not noticing and grinding across everything, but you can notice there's a difference in people talking, then eventually the shift will happen. So yeah, that's all I had. So hopefully you guys found something useful out of that. Otherwise, thank you for listening to my random stories about RuneScape and my trips to Queensland. But yeah.
Thanks, Matthew. Let me unmute guys so you can ask questions, but I have a few already in the chat while I'm figuring out how to unmute everybody back. Can you hear me?
Oh.
What is that? Okay, yep. So somebody, yeah, I guess I couldn't just unmute anybody. Okay, Matthew, so a few questions here. The one question is, did you build the chatbot internally with open source tool, or what tools did you use?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the moment, we currently partner with Nuance for our chatbot solution. There's definitely some work that we're looking to do in terms of an AI strategy and how we can make it accessible for things more than just chatbot and building some things from there. But in terms of whether we build it internally, we don't. We use a vendor to help, I guess, push some stuff out.
Mm-hmm. So basically you are doing a product management and then you have a vendor who is helping you to build the chatbots, right?
Yeah, so from a development side, from Nuance, as well as I think we've got an allowance that they put in for optimization on some articles, which covers a little bit of it. But when you're looking at trying to automate different business processes, especially in things like insurance, where you can try and get claims lodgement done, for example, which is quite a popular one during high intensity times where people want to get on the phone and sort of going through it. That requires additional work. So when I'm referring to bringing conversational designers on board, I'll be working on big new projects, as well as helping out our existing content that we do reviews with Nuance for.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Another question from
Pavel, I might just add to that as well, that question about whether you build internally or not. And often it depends on your organization's maturity. So if you are just starting out, which I'll talk about a little bit later, if you are just starting out, then maybe it is best to use open source and free tools because you haven't got the budgets to go spend with large integrators or large vendors. But equally, once you're much more mature, you're probably unlikely to want to stay in the open source space, and you want to transition towards something more mature, something more robust. It's just what I wanted to add.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dennis. Another question from Krishna. Any views of which demographics chatbots appeal to insurance market or elsewhere?
To be honest, I haven't really dug into the data around certain demographics that use chatbot more than others. So there may be other people more well-positioned here to actually answer that question. But from an insurance perspective, it's definitely something I'll be looking into. At the moment, I'm just trying to build a team around me and continue to push momentum so I have some breathing space to sort of have a look at it. So sorry, I can't answer that question around the appeal within the insurance markets and sort of in terms of demographics. But in terms of if you're using a proxy when it comes to things like mobile, which I tend to do, there's a lot of demographics around how especially the younger generations are starting to communicate, and a lot of that sort of tends to be when they're buying things through a conversational space, and there's a lot of uptake in terms of, I guess, video use as well. So it'll be an interesting space, I think, to look out for.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And there is one question from Talani, which I think we should discuss towards the end. The question is about what's the adoption of chatbots during the pandemic, and does it help companies to respond faster? I think this is the topic I want to spend maybe 10 minutes to have like a proper discussion towards the end of our meetup, because I think, yeah, that's a lot of things to discuss, and definitely it's one of the key, but I think we'll keep it for this particular piece. Another question from Surendra: how to measure performance and benefits of a chatbot, Matt, from your experience?
I guess that sort of depends on what you're looking at. So I guess if you're looking at it from the perspective of overall, there's different measures that you can use, such as your intent matching and engagement rates. But it really depends on the context. So for example, if you're on an FAQ page and you're measuring things like your engagement rate, the higher that your engagement rate is on an FAQ page is probably not a good thing to sort of measure it against. So I think it's a case-by-case metric. So things that I currently look at is the engagement rate, the activity that occurs after they've spoken to our chatbot, as well as the intent matching, and also, I guess, the escalations to web chat. Those are some of the metrics that I look at, and that I've built some, I guess, measures of success around. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, it really just depends on what area of scope you're looking at from my perspective anyway.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And the question from Maria. Maria, would you like to ask your voice? Maria? Well, I'll start reading it, and yeah, if you can unmute, just go on. I think there is two parts of the question. So the first one, do you use users' past interactions with your chatbot? And second, how do you use this information and interaction to create a personalized user experience?
That's a really good question to put in there. So at the moment, we're working through putting authentication on. So in terms of tracking past interactions in a way that we can personalize the user experience, it's not quite there in the sense that we can, use first names, suggest different things, and there's a sort of barrier between what we can give and can't give that breaches financial advice. In terms of the first question, which is, do you use past interactions with your chatbot? In the sense where if a customer's been on our website and they have cookies on their website, then we are able to target some of them. But at this stage, we don't capture the past interactions that they've had, mainly because we can't identify them, which is part of that authentication piece.
All right. So it's not easy to. So basically, when somebody is going to the website, they typically don't log in, right? They just acting as a new user.
Yeah. So in terms of our website, we have 30% of our customers log in when they interact with the website, and also it's about in line when they interact with our chatbot as well. But a large majority of our customers don't log in when they interact with our website. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. And last question before I'll hand over to Dennis. Question from Krishna. Do you see chatbots more effective when used on their own, or is a hybrid mode of communication switching from chatbot to human interaction?
I think if you can integrate the both of them, that would be great. It just really comes back down to resources, and maybe Dennis might have a different opinion on that as well. But ideally, if you can get your chatbot to build up and sort of empathize and calculate sentiment, there may be no need to actually escalate it to a human interaction. So that would be my goal, to sort of go through there. But I can't see why it wouldn't be just as effective. But from our perspective, we're trying to reduce human interaction unless it's a really complex mode. So that's the sort of direction that we've taken.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Really interesting one. At the start, it was difficult a bit to follow your logic that you put in it together, but then towards the end, you kind of put it back together to the idea. And interesting because during discussion, you had like some things like everywhere you can die, and I thought, okay, so how would you refer to it? And that you referred to it better.
It's what happens when you don't communicate.
Yeah.
In your business and your stakeholders come after you.
Yeah. Oh, actually, last question here for you. What % of queries are currently fully automated by your chatbot?
What % of our queries? I don't know I don't really know how to address that. There's always questions that we don't have answers to. When I picked it up back in a couple months ago, it's still in a pretty immature state. I'd say we're probably around the 30 to 40% mark at the moment, but I'm hoping that once we get some more people on board, like I discussed before, that will quickly pick up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Matt. So Dennis, handing over to you. For whom of you don't know Dennis has experience, how many, like 15 years with the chatbots, and I believe Dennis had a course before in building the conversational agents in one of the universities, so definitely a lot of experience. And Dennis going to talk about the building the finding opportunities, finding the use cases for the chatbots in I think in transport for New South Wales. So Dennis, all over to you.
Just a quick check. Can you all see my screen with the presentation on it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, I really love the example of everywhere you can die, and there are only like 10 safe zones, because I think we are very much playing with new technology. There are still areas of where people are failing and where some of them are dying. And by dying, I kind of mean that projects don't necessarily succeed, or it means that their funding is cut in the future, or your chatbot are dramatically reduced. So I really like the analogy. I might use that one in future as well. So just a little bit about myself very quickly, just to give you context. As Pavel said, I studied in the field of natural language technology, particularly around NLP and voice recognition. I did my thesis on conversational design for the university, had a scholarship with CSIRO to build a TV and cinema guide. So Matt, you might be very interested that back in 2003, a small team of us built and designed and built a platform where you could say, what's on TV tonight? What's on Channel 7? What's that movie with Mel Gibson in it again, where he wears a skirt? So we looked at doing that for CSIRO. I taught the topic on conversational design. Back then it was called spoken language dialogue systems. So taught that back in 2003 and onwards for a few years before we decided to kill the course because there weren't enough jobs. And I remember when I was working in the industry after that, my professor said, Professor Robert Dale asked the question of, should we keep the course, should we kill it? And I said, realistically, where I work, we only hire a small handful of us. So I can't say that there are the same number of jobs for databases or websites or infrastructure. And so I couldn't in good conscience say that there would be lots of jobs waiting for these people at the end of the day, at the end of the tunnel. And I think the tides have changed where conversational is back in and evident by everyone that's here today. I really appreciate you spending your time today to hear what we've got to say, and hopefully you will come on the journey for a lesson. I did a startup called Pure Speech Technology Research Group. We were looking at the medical domain, as Pavel asked me earlier, about the medical space. So we wrote research papers, presented in the US, all around supporting people once they go home. We'd ring them, how's your blood pressure, how are you feeling? If you're not feeling well, let's put you into a nurse or a doctor if you've got escalations needed for your medical conditions. I worked for 12 years after that as a voice specialist, doing every stage of delivery in a number of different countries, Australia, New Zealand, UK. Interestingly, Matthew, we also did work for the betting agencies like Paddy Power up in the UK. I flew up there to the nice cold London it is to do a bit of work for them. You know, we've worked with telcos, insurance, banking, energy, transportation, and I've been a VUI designer, looked at performance analytics and wrote my own performance platforms for that, focused on continual improvements and just natural language processing and do solution architecture as well. But I'm here to talk about what I've done for transport as a use case in terms of what's it like to build a business case and how to get the momentum in that area. But whilst I was at transport, I've held a number of product roles, looking after different products. But the one for the chatbot, which is the biggest one that I looked after, has won a number of multiple awards, including being shortlisted as a finalist for the Prime Minister's Award for Excellence. So I think the team that we have did an excellent job. And for anyone looking to start out, the size of these bots, whether you build them on an open source platform or engage a vendor, varies greatly as you scale your solution and as you get more funding as well. So it's probably useful to note. These days, since leaving transport, I've decided to focus back on my previous startup, Pure Speech Technology. So just helping organizations on that journey. So a bit of background, what it was like when I joined transport. I was looking after their contact center as a product manager, had high volumes of calls. We had 4 contact centers. A lot of customer feedback went through our contact center. And we were looking at ways to reduce costs whilst maintaining the customer experience. So, I mean, whilst I was there, there's a strong drive towards digital adoption. And that's no different to most organizations going through digital transformation. One thing worth, like Matt mentioned earlier about partnerships or collaborating, I think it's important to look at your channel landscape, your mix of channels in which you engage, because, you know, you may have programs at play that may be better served by going to third parties like transport has done in opening all its data and says, data's all freely available. You can go build your own apps. And in fact, a lot of the apps that people use for public transport are not transport owned. And so, you know, in that way, you're servicing the citizen or the customers by producing your data that you already have, just sharing it, and you kind of deliver that outcome for free or near free. So it's important to look at that whole ecosystem. And to the question was asked earlier about switching, hybrid comms, switching from humans to chatbots. I think it's important to understand your entire channel mix across, social media, across your call center, across email, across web forms, across, WhatsApp if you choose to go down that path as well, because that'll have a play as to where you put your chatbots at the end of the day. There's, I looked after a Voice of Digital initiative, which was to shift people from the contact center into digital channels. And at the time I asked the question to myself, how do we get customers to stop calling us? A large volume of our callers are asking about trip planning information that can be made available on the internet or through mobile apps, so in digital channels. So why do they still choose to call us? And I think it's a realization that there's been an evolution of channels in how people engage with our organizations. We started with contact centers and voice calls. We moved to the era of websites, and everyone had to build a website, and everything's responsive now. And then people moved towards building mobile apps, and there's a lot of apps, and there's a bit of, there's a lot of reports out there you can find that talk about app fatigue, where people don't want to go, oh, another app to download to manage my energy bill, another app to download to make a bet. I just want one to make bets across the entire country, across the entire world if I needed to. Social media and messaging platforms. So, Instagram, sharing photos, messaging apps like WhatsApp or, like Messenger through Facebook. In the Asian countries like WeChat, massive amounts of time are spent in messaging. And so that's where people are moving chatbots. But ironically, we've come full circle and we're going back to voice, but with voice assistants, with your Google Homes, Amazon Alexas, your Siris as well. We're going down that path. But the tech's new, and there's a lot of people that are unfamiliar with it. To use Matt's analogy, there's lots of ways to die. And so I think it's important that you start with, a proof of concept, a trial. Test before you go out there with all your good weapons and whatnot and lose those in a battle. You really want to sort of start light, spend light, and build a proof of concept first. And that's what I did at Transport for New South Wales. I procured an Alexa device from the US, brought it over, configured it to work in Australia, built an app and demoed it. And from there, it sort of garnered interest and it took off. I was like, wow, we can do this. And I was like, absolutely, we can do this. So step one is I say, start with a proof of concept when you're commencing. Don't necessarily throw lots of money at it or a huge investment. Prove it works first before you move on. In terms of gaining momentum, when I talk to companies and work with organizations, some of the biggest challenges we get when they're sort of not quite mature yet enough to have funding to pay for vendors, large vendors, we're talking like millions of dollars here. It can be hard to get off the ground. And I've tried to sum it up here into the things I have observed that cause these to happen. So low customer outcomes, that means the customer experience isn't necessarily better. Sometimes it's worse. Customers are left chatting to something, don't get the answer, and then they'll have to call. So now they've wasted their time chatting to a chatbot and then getting additional help. Executives also expect, you might get the command that comes down that says, we want a bot, go roll one out. But that doesn't work well necessarily. And maybe you've not met their expectations and you have not kept them in the loop all along. So to communicate frequently is really important. The low budget for future works, if you don't get more budget, you don't go beyond a pilot, or it gets deprioritized, or you're in COVID days and money is being spent on the website instead of on the chatbot. So it is important that you can define your benefits, articulate your benefits, and show them that you are meeting those benefit targets. Low personal contribution value. We all go to work hoping to make a difference. We invest our time, our energy, and we hope not to work on products that are a waste of time or don't really succeed. To use Matt's analogy again, if you spent all this time leveling up your character, then suddenly died, it'd be such a pain, right? And then often people don't know what they're measuring, so they don't define their benefits up front, and they struggle then to show that their KPIs are being met because they don't have the data available, and to retrospectively inject, I guess, markers or stats that get spat out. It's a little bit harder, and there's a lot of work churning in the wheels to produce new features, new functions, meet new demands, and there's no time for reporting. So I say for tip number 2, make sure you define your benefits up front, very early on before you commence the core project. Just very quickly, you could make use of a framework. There's lots of frameworks out there around benefits. This is the one that we use. It tries to focus at employee engagement, quality operations, customer satisfaction, loyalty, retention, and brand reputation. So if you try and look at all those 5 tiers and find ways that your bot can assist in those areas, then hopefully you can turn all of those lines into a dollar metric, which means that you don't have these challenges because you've got the metrics, you're improving the CX because CX is one chunk or one band of the metrics you're measuring. You've got your KPI data that's being generated so you can produce it, and then you're working on projects that aren't failing. They're proceeding to the next stage and gaining momentum. So again, benefits really important to get them up front early on. I guess once you've defined your benefits of what you want to achieve, it's then trying to find the right use cases for us. And this is the sort of gamut of things we tend to see people building chatbot functions for and features. And again, it's very functional. It's not very geared around marketing in terms of lead generation or just brand goodwill and reputation in that regard, because it's really hard to quantify that. And if, especially COVID days, you really want to focus on putting money in your organization's pocket at the end of the day. So for us, it's looking at things like FAQ or question and answers. How do we provide answers to customers? They don't ask us, they don't look at our website, they don't call us. We may need to route people to other parts of the organization that can help better service their needs. So we need to identify why they're contacting us. We may just need them to fill in a form for payments or feedback or, applying for insurance. We may tap into our APIs to pull data. Like if you're on Australia Post, you might want to check where the status of your package is. So this one's quite unique, and that's kind of where the bulk of everything sits in terms of real value. It's where organizations leverage their existing technology stack and provide that available to customers through a new channel like voice or chat in messaging systems. And then there's a whole section around verification. What do you do once you've logged in, proven who you are, and then you're behind this logged in state. So there's a whole bunch of other functions you can do after that. So certainly try and look at all things that can be done in your organization. If you're looking for use cases, you have your benefits you think you want to get, or at least the metrics you want to measure in terms of goals. And from there, it's really good to try and find sources of information where you might be able to identify use cases. So, start with your strategy and your business. You may have a business driver that just says save dollars, or we want to shut down our contact center, or we need to launch a new product or something, and we need to garner more people there. So start with the business drivers. A common tool in the product and UX space is the jobs to be done framework. So look at the jobs that customers are trying to do, like if you're applying for insurance or trying to get from A to B, that's the task they need to do. Everything else is sort of irrelevant apart from getting their outcome, so making it functional. And then of course, looking at your existing customer contacts. What are people posting in the social media, both publicly to your page, within private groups? What are your live chats transcripts showing? How are people interacting with your organization? Why are they making inquiries? Look at your feedback. Why are people writing complaints and filling in your feedback forms and sending emails? Look at your web traffic. Which pages are being hit? Where do they spend the most time? Where do they abandon the website experience in the sequence of things you want to do? But also look at your contact center. So how are people calling your call center? What time of day? What are they asking for? What are the inquiry types? I think one of the challenges we often see organizations say is that they have all this data or information available, but it's actually really hard to categorize and annotate it because it's just manual. And there's just so much data out there. Like if you want to transcribe, I don't know, 1,000 calls, that takes time, it costs money. And then you have to manually sit there and you have to tag it and say, this call was about X and this call was about Y. Admittedly, we did the same thing at Transport at some stage. We said we wanted to sample some calls while they're calling us, so we can shift those calls out of the contact center. What's the real reason they're calling? And you might say, Dennis, why didn't you just use the wrap codes? Agents use wrap codes in their sessions. And we find, because I've been in the industry for 17 plus years, we find the wrap codes are often inaccurate. They might be anywhere between 30 to 80% accurate in terms of agents selecting the right codes. Your business restructures, it creates some new codes, the agents don't know about them, or they're sorted alphabetically and agents just pick the one they find closest to it or near it, and they don't always pick the right one. So I think it's important to listen to the calls, to read the customer feedback and find out ways that, what customers are doing, so you can then find your use cases. It's important then, as a result of that, to leverage analysis tools, because doing it very manually, it's painful. So hopefully you guys can find some tools that will help you out there. Otherwise, there's just good old Excel spreadsheets. From there, once you've identified your use cases, you want to move towards prioritizing, value. And this is a framework that we use, again, from a perspective of trying to work out, is it highly automatable, so it's easy to do? Can we automate it very quickly? And are there clear benefits? We just simply rank high, medium, and low against a whole bunch of criteria, add some metrics to that, and then you've got a numeric version of prioritizing your use cases to see what's of value. So on to, something tangible, what we did at Transport. As I mentioned earlier, it was part of a Voice to Digital initiative that I was looking after, to shift customers away from the contact center, recognizing that there are a number of new channels in which customers prefer to engage. It's about, for us, we coined the term giving customers the channel of choice. So customers may choose and prefer to engage over WhatsApp, over Facebook, over Twitter. Let's meet our customers in those channels to give them the information they want. And it's a bit like, if you use the analogy of driving, if you drive the same path, to work every day, you rarely deviate from that path. If you're used to calling, you're less likely to deviate that path unless you're shown a new path and a better path that's faster and easier. And so again, it was about meeting customers in their channel of choice. So we met them in a place that they felt comfortable with and may choose to engage us. And as a result of that, move away from calling us. So it was geared around, supporting customers in a number of different channels. We put together the strategy around being in the website, in Messenger, on Twitter, on Google, on Alexa and Siri. We looked at Apple Business Chat and WhatsApp Chat, but they weren't quite the right timings. And we sought to basically provide that wheel of information of use cases across FAQs. Can I bring my surfboard on the bus or bike on the train? How do I get from A to B? So it's very data driven. We looked at disruptions, so push notifications that were personalized to customers. They were able to say, I live here, I have my workplace over there. Let me know if there's any disruptions that impact me. And that's available on Twitter, on Facebook, on Amazon Alexa as well. We sought to reduce customer feedback. How do we simplify the experience of filling in the forms that we have? If you visit our website, it's something like 20 items long to fill in feedback. But if you visit and submit feedback through Facebook, it's only like 5 questions. What's your issue? Give us your photo, any more info, you're done. So we try to use our tools like natural language processing off the back of that to try and make life easier, so the manual work on the business side is reduced. And of course, then there's a whole transactional space of buying things and booking things as well, which were in flight at the time that I chose to leave Transport. With that, we had a single bot that underpinned it that was across all these different channels. And we also supported the escalation to social media community managers. So to the question that was asked earlier about about switching channels. I think it is important to provide customers alternate avenues to get their answers if we cannot answer them in that channel that we are currently in. But again, it's like some channels are better served than others. Like maybe it's faster that they talk to a human to negotiate something, or maybe someone's going through a difficult scenario and they flagged that due to COVID, they've lost their job and they can't pay for the bills. And rather than have a bot say, tough luck, you're better off having a human interact with them at that point in time. So really try and look at the channel that you should be engaging your customers with for the type of inquiry that you're answering. I guess a few other lessons that I picked up along the way whilst working in government is the customer base is all inclusive. It means that we cannot say that we only care about the elderly, we only care about commuters, we only care about those in Sydney Metro. We unfortunately have the goal of making sure we are everything to everyone. So we have to cater for functionality that suits everyone. And it's not something that you can achieve because not everyone's in Twitter. And as we found out when we presented to a disability group around what we were doing in Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa, it was great for those that were vision impaired that could use Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa. So one half of the room was like, that's great. And the other half of the room was like, no, that's not cool. We can't use that at all. And then equally, because we had new push notifications going out around disruptions, then those that were deaf or had auditory disabilities, they were like, that's great. But then the other half of the room was like, no, that doesn't work for us. So it's extremely hard to make everyone happy. And that's something that you will probably come across in working in the bot space. But I think, try and pick the customers you're targeting and make sure it works for them, works well. Another tip I have to give is around the brand and persona. If you don't engage them early enough and even get them familiar with the technology, at the time we launched, chatbots were fairly new. I remember the marketing team asking, what's a chatbot? How does it work? And it means that it's harder for them to help promote your products. Like Matt says, make sure you collaborate with your channels. So back to the first point, collaborate with the channels that you might want to shift your customers from, and work with your brand and marketing teams, because without them, giving input into the language and the tone of your chatbot, it's actually quite, as you get new staff coming on board, new conversational designers, will they write in the same manner that the previous person wrote in? And often you look at the web channel and you'll see there is a writing guide. And you go to social media, and if your company's mature, it'll also have a style guide or the do's and don'ts of social media responses. And this channel is no different, that you should very early on define those so that you have a clear brand and a clear persona. And then everything flows on after that. The language and the tone is set. The conversational designers know what they're building towards, and the copy that they write is also suited to that. The player killers that Matt talked about, people that come out there and just want to kill you as soon as you leave your safe zone. Being government, we do have cases where people want to just target us and just smear the government. And so there were some inaccurate news articles that were put out. And there were even vendors that got up after that and said that we can do this faster and cheaper. But when we look behind the curtain and we ask the questions of, are you using our data really? The answer was no. So that actually mocked up something, a fake experience, and perpetrated it as being a real experience being built in 24 hours and better than the designs that we put together. So there will be opposition. There will be player killers out there that are just out there to tear you down. And I think, the best advice I can give is just to ignore them and just focus on doing the right thing for your customers. If you get bogged down in trying to respond or being impacted by someone trying to tear you down in that area for what you're building, it gets a bit tough at times. So, like Simon Sinek says, just focus on improving, focus on the long game. And so long as you're making the outcome better for your customers, better for the business, you'll win at the end of the day. I guess the final tip I have to give is just around the uncertainties. It's relatively new still, probably evident by everyone attending today. There's a lot of interest in the area, and not everyone understands how to do these well. Like from your executives that have heard that chatbots are being done, to the managers that are running the teams, to the people that have to reskill in your organization to build bots, and to your channel partners that may not understand what bots are all about. There's a whole learning and reskilling of your organization that has to happen, because, if you compare where people are at with their web knowledge to mobile app knowledge to social media knowledge, you'll find that the knowledge around bots and automation and AI is even lower. There is a skills shortage. So look at ways that you can bring more people on your journey. And one of the things I did at Transport was, hold a free lunch and learn session that just costed me and my team a little bit of time. Lunch and learn, openly invite, the organization along and say, we're doing a topic on chatbots, deep diving, come and learn more, come see some of the other chatbots that are out there. So that kind of helps build the momentum, builds the interest, and uplifts the organization as a whole in terms of understanding how bots work. But I think it's important, go get training, go get reskilled. People's jobs will have to change. There's no doubt that, some of these bots are being built to save money, and it means that the dollars have to be saved. And so for those people who are impacted, if I ever speak to them, I recommend that they start to reskill. If you're in the contact center answering the phone, look at ways you can help, curate content or something for your chatbot, because you answer things already. If you're in the social media space, you're already writing responses in a witty, bantering manner. Maybe you should do the same. You could be a copywriter for a chatbot as well. So there's a whole bunch of tips in there to try and look at how do you move your entire organization on that journey to gain momentum. As Matt said earlier, don't do this alone. Find your partners in the channels, partner with them to see how you can improve their goals, but also take your organization on the journey, the same journey that you are on today in terms of attending this meetup. You need to bring the rest of your organization on that journey so that they can implement it and back you. And soon everyone will think of chatbots, voice or text, being the same kind of level of knowledge and understanding as mobile apps and or websites as well. I think that's all I had to speak about, and I think I'm just on time. I'm all, as I said, for a continual improvement and growth, and I have a little survey if you guys have some time. You can hit up the URL, a tiny URL, Chatbot Meetup feedback May, and let us know if I've hopefully given you useful information, how we can improve what we share in these sessions at meetup events, because without your feedback, we can't improve and we can't make it more valuable for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Okay, I see you posted a link for the survey. So one thing I can ask everybody now, I can run a quick poll, just quick poll now through Zoom. So I hope everybody can ask just a few technical questions, and then you can go through probably the video one that Dennis created, so we can get instant feedback. Now, there are a lot of questions, Dennis, meanwhile, so let me start with them. I will spend next maybe 10, 12 minutes to the questions to Dennis, and then we'll go into like a more deeper discussion. I think first topic in the discussion will be about the pandemic and using the chatbots during the pandemic, and then we'll see how it goes for us. So guys, yep, stay with us. So the first question for you then is from L. Are you using biometrics and medtech, or are you just asking people questions to gauge their health status? So it was about the health.
Not health one. So if you remember the diagram I showed earlier about my history, that was back in 2004. And so that work that we were doing had been put aside there afterwards. So we no longer do that work in the health space. So the short answer is no. We're not using biometrics or medtech. But back then it was about just triage, asking questions like their health status, their heart rate. We looked at asthma as well. So the whole decision support systems that are used for asthma, like a decision tree, which you would build for a chatbot, is the same. We looked at how do we use that in the medical space to see whether we need to escalate or ask a different set of questions. They choose your own adventure equivalent. So biometrics, I don't know whether you'd use that for health status. Maybe you can identify who's speaking and you can verify that. There are other people doing stuff in the emotional detection. So it's really good for suicide prevention, or in your contact center. If people are getting angry, you know about it through information. So there's tonal company called Beyond Verbal that does work in this space, that you can kind of plug and play sort of into your environments to try and find out more information around the emotion of things. Yep.
I think it's interesting, right? Because you're thinking that potentially you can use a video, you can use a voice, and I heard some research about can you even recognize like COVID-19 by your voice, right? So potentially there is a big potential, big opportunity in using it. But I'm just wondering, it's kind of it's too invasive, right? Just imagine you're talking with a chatbot, and this chatbot analyzing your voice, analyzing your health, and also saying, by the way, like you might not feel very well. So it's kind of it's a dangerous space, I think. But for the health bots, it's probably something very important that should go ahead. But yeah, I think it's interesting space to look at.
I would hope that in 10 years' time, we fast forward and we are there, where like CCTV footage, when cameras first came out, everyone was like, oh my God, I use my ATM and someone's watching me. I go into a shop and someone's watching me. We don't care about those cameras anymore. And I hope we get to that stage one day from a medical perspective, because if it means better health outcomes for a small amount of, and the data is protected and privacy is looked after and ethics as well, then I think we end up in a better place as an entirety.
Yeah, definitely. Regarding these medical ones, I worked once for the startup where we developed like a medical pod, where basically you can come into the pod and you can talk with a doctor, and there might be a nurse that could get some analysis from you. So it potentially, right, this is not that invasive because you specifically go in there to have some of the analysis done. So that might be a combination of like bot and some hardware to do. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so next question. What are your thoughts on WhatsApp bots?
WhatsApp bots. I think we should be building them. I had a really good experience, and I forget who with, but I was shopping internationally and I had a WhatsApp account, and I messaged it, instant response. And then I was on my way and into purchasing and whatnot. I think it needs to be managed in the right way. And again, you need a way to escalate customers. When Facebook first came out with their bots, they didn't allow humans to sit in the same channel as chatbots. And it took them like, 6 to 12 months to fix that. So it meant when we first launched at Transport, we launched a completely separate page in which the chatbot sat. And then we had our main page, which had, thousands and thousands of followers and likes against it. And we had to move people from one page into the bot page. And then when Facebook allowed the two to play together, we had to move everyone back. And so I'm not too sure on the technology at this point in time, but I wouldn't want to move into building bots in WhatsApp unless I could escalate properly to a human and back and forth seamlessly. There are platforms that are available out there that do chat for social media and allow for chatbots to integrate. But the challenge with social media is because it's so real time, so live messaging, some platforms have a longer latency. Like they might only poll the entire internet to see how many new posts are put up about a particular topic every X seconds, every 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And that might result in a delay in your conversation, which you do not want to have. And so there's this whole technical challenge now about how do you make sure it's real time and you can escalate properly. But I think it's a really good question.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, there are quite a lot of them. Next one is, Yeah, I think it's again about, have you or anyone else have any experience with WhatsApp or ABC as a chat channel? What is ABC as a chat channel? Have you heard of it?
Apple Business Chat.
Apple.
So we met with, at the time I was at Transport, we met with the guys in the US that flew in, Apple Business Chat, to talk about their product as well. I think Apple Business Chat, to me at the time, kind of tied a lot into locations, so maps. You know, the way it surfaces itself is you can iMessage the business through iMessage through only one half of your cohort of customers. So only your Apple users can do this, and not your Android users. But it meant that when you're on the maps and you click on a map, there may be a phone number about your business. So if it's you sell flowers, you click on the icon and it's got a bit of information about the business, but there's a chat to us icon as well. That's where it was used. It was available in Siri and a few other small places. So I think when we were at Transport, we looked into potentially doing that, but it's kind of like, we wouldn't necessarily attach the contact information and the chat to us button at every station and every bus stop on a map in Google, in Apple Maps. And it doesn't make sense to do that as well. People don't go to Apple Maps to talk to us. So it really depends on the use case in that scenario. So I think whilst the channel's available for use, I'd ask our customers there, are they happy to use it? And is there a way to transition your customers into that channel? Because if they don't easily move into that channel, you're going to be pushing uphill to get users, pushing uphill to have a good user experience, and then pushing uphill further to try and demonstrate your benefits of why you spent the money in that space.
Okay, thank you. So Erin, I think there are some guys from Haptic who has experience in WhatsApp, so probably you can reach out to them to have this discussion, because they mentioned it. So it was quite a journey, so I guess there are a lot of challenges along the road with this one. Next question from L. I'm not sure how to correctly pronounce it, L or Ella, sorry about that. The question is, do you design for voice and chat simultaneously? And why one or the other or both? And what is the business case?
Personally speaking, I'm pro voice, so I'd say both, to both voice and chat. But I think, the voice channels for voice assistant are a lot more immature in terms of it's not prominently used as much. And so it's more of a future horizon that you want to do later. Right now, I think there's a really good use case for building bots and text channels, in messaging channels where people are already, like, if I did a show of hands, how many people have Google Homes in their house? How often do you use it? Would you use it to talk to organization X? How do you even know that organization X has a Google Assistant action? There wouldn't be many hands that go up. And so for me, it's, right now, the value is definitely in the text space. But you want to make sure you have an eye on the future horizon for voice, because when you design it for voice, make it available in the home or in the car. So when people are driving, they can't usually interact with your organization, they now can. And that same experience that you have in the car or in the home can kind of largely be taken back into the call center. And so there's huge benefits of saying, we've designed it for text, we've designed it for voice in the home and the car. Oh, and by the way, it also now works in the call center. So boom, your dollar savings are there. And I know there are organizations that are focusing on the contact center, because that's where the dollars are. But all you're doing is replacing what's already there. You aren't really shifting the landscape in any way, or you've not made your organization reach customers in more channels, in the channels of choice. So I would do both, but you might prioritize chat first over voice unless you target the contact center.
Okay, I also can add that probably like the conversation in the voice and in the text is different, and words using is different. So if you're doing it, it's basically like two things that you developed and that each is totally different. So you can't just reuse it. So you cannot, and one of the mistakes I saw some of the companies did when they tried to build a chatbot without previously having any web chat. So what they did was analyze the calls and then put the calls into the text, and then try to build a chatbot based on this text. And then we have a problem, because people are not using the web chat the same way they talk during the voice calls. And like you have a lot of the challenges around it. Okay.
Just on that, I think a really good example. Can you guys still see my screen or not?
Yeah.
Yes, Ken.
Okay, cool. So whilst we have a bot on all these channels, and there are platforms out there that claim that you can build your experience once and it can be on all channels at once. To Pavel's point, I think it's important that you make sure each experience in these channels are as rich as they can be in those channels. So if we had a channel for SMS or WhatsApp, they don't have image and carousels like on Facebook Messenger does. Depending if you're on a screen device like a smart screen with Google Home, or you've just got a speaker, you can only show certain things. So again, the experience should be built on a per channel basis, even though the functionality might be the same in general, and the outcomes you're trying to shift customers away from one place to the other. It really should be built per channel.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dennis. Next question, that's an interesting one. I'm trying to understand it from Elle as well. I have to ask, the Centrelink chatbot, if it was human, wouldn't have a job. Why release something so wildly unfit for purpose? Is it part of an agenda or willfully putting people off?
I have to admit, I haven't talked to the Centrelink chatbot, but I will give an example of a client that I've worked with in the past, a long time ago. They had clear goals to save dollars, and as a result of that, they had said, our best practices were like, we want to escalate to a human after 2, 3, 4 failed attempts. We want to escalate, and they bluntly said no. We want to keep them in the bot for as long as we can, so it costs us less money at the end of the day. If they hang up, great. And so I can't say that that's what Centrelink is doing, but I appreciate now why in some cases best practices are not followed, because there are competing agendas at play. There may be business goals or business drivers at it, and not necessarily just a lack of maturity or competency in that particular space. And these things that most people don't realize cost a lot of effort to maintain. Without the right tools to maintain these, you have to look at the ways that people are talking to your organization, how they continue to evolve to talk to your organization, what kind of things they're asking about. You don't set and forget. And anyone that's built a bot knows that there are so many different things to follow up on in terms of new intents to create, intent clashes, and that's very hard to manage at times. So I guess it is may not be as good as you want it to be, but there are reasons for that at times.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dennis. Another question from Krishna. Is there a pathway to scale in a large organization that is starting with a POC, or how actually to scale?
It depends on your organization. If you've got good backing to say, your executive and the person with the purse strings says, yes, we like it, then there's no real issue apart from scaling the team. So scaling the team then means finding the right resources, finding your conversational designers, people that know what they're doing, that can execute well. Now, if you don't have funding or you don't have backing, that's a different story, because then it's about convincing people that it's the next wave, it's the next big thing, it's going to solve problems. And to do that, you kind of have to take iterative steps to test and learn, so to speak, to experiment, to prove hypotheses and demonstrate that to people, and continually basically pitch it and say, hey, we have a bot that used to do this. This is what we tested and now does that. And this is the outcome. And people will go, great, we get it now. And then hopefully funding follows there afterwards. So it really does depend. And I think it's important to right size your team. Like if you're doing a POC, you only need 1 or 2 people that can do it in their spare time, maybe, or you can set up a team. If you really want to do a solid POC, engage a vendor. So if you don't have the skills to do it in-house, engage a vendor to do something small. But you need to right size the team for the scale of your maturity. So depending on what stage you're at, don't go hiring a full agile team and saying we're an agile workshop, so we need to have scrum masters, BAs, testers, etc. If you're still in the early stages and your funding is low as well, try and put real dollars back in your organization's pocket. That to me is the fastest path to scaling.
Yeah, perfect answer. So the quick wins, and then you have money back, and then you can develop. The question is very close to this original from Michael. What is a reasonable starting budget to start light and do a working POC?
Anywhere from zero in terms of if you do it yourself in your spare time to maybe 10 to 30K in that space. Like if you think about what does it cost to hire a contractor, you know, anywhere between $8 to $1,000, even more for contractors. And you give them, you know, 10 days, that's 10 grand, give them 20 days, that's 20 grand, roughly speaking. Not saying that that's how much they charge, but, you know, if you were to hire contractors just off the shelf or off the street to do an agile project in IT, that's the kind of budgets you'll look at. So expect to pay around that as well.
Though I would add that probably that first you need to analyze what can be your benefits, because that define how much you want to invest. Because the problem is sometimes that if you try to do a cheap POC, you might have a problems that the results won't be as good and your program might not go ahead, but potentially the benefits might be in the millions of dollars for you. So then it's reasonably to invest more into POC, right? But if there are, the benefits is unclear and you don't know where to use, that's a different question where you actually now to try and go with a minimum budget as possible. I think it's very important to look at what are the benefits and use your framework, right? Then it's like there are framework that you can just try and figure out where you should do POC. Because POC should prove something to you, right? So that's what you want to test, what to prove. Okay, I think we have a time for one more question, and then we'll discuss about this pandemic thing, which I'm really excited to discuss. Okay, the question is, can you shed more light on the security challenges on chatbots?
It again depends on what you're building. If it's just FAQs on the public part of your website, then there's very little security considerations in that area, apart from, you know, if the data is already available on your website as well, even less so. But if you're now, you know, asking people to log in or give private information or the Opal card ID or something, then you have to treat that information the same way you would treat it as part of your organization. So, you know, we were talking with the Cancer Institute, and they were like, we want to do a bot that that captures information so we can help them quit smoking. But then how do we store this information? You know, so you have to look at all those elements of the privacy and the security elements of it. But most of these bots can almost be treated as, I guess the analogy like just a dumb talking interface. So you can keep all the data and everything behind the scenes in your organization, and you can architect the bot so that it only passes through information and doesn't house any of it locally, so to speak. So yes, you are passing information through, and at the time it may log that information, and you can ask that the platform vendor you choose or the platform you have scrub that data if they do support that. But otherwise, you can try and segregate it at your organization layer and say everything's kept in-house. We even have the driving control of what the chatbot does next, and the logic or the business logic that might be sensitive. We keep that behind the scene, behind our firewalls.
It's perhaps, hi, it's Peter Nan here. It's perhaps worth pointing out there aren't many chatbots that take things like credit card numbers yet. And one of the reasons for that is that, you know, if they do go out to a cloud service, be it, you know, Google or Lex or something else like that, there's always that concern that there's an opportunity that data might leak out. So that's something that's been holding back some of the chatbots doing more personal related data, I think. But there are potentially alternatives around that by, you know, like doing NLU in-house with certain options.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Just this is Stephanie here. Just a question from that perspective then. But in China, WeChat, they accept a lot of payment methodologies. So what's the difference there?
Less concern about security, perhaps. Is that in WeChat? Is that like the WeChat app? Is that the difference?
Yeah, they do it in the WeChat app, and it's like China is such a different minefield. So different. They're like, okay to have everything. If it's running in China, then it's okay. Yeah, we had that at Bosch as well. So it's a completely different ballgame. They've got a very different approach to security and data security.
Yeah. Plus, I think WeChat as an application has a lot of security embedded, and it's just one application that they use for everything, for payments as well, right? So they anyway store the cards there. So what they do, they just make it available for the chat applications also to utilize this data.
Yeah, there's a lot of integrations into that app.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you're going this way or not at some degree, but it's totally amazing. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Dennis. I think really good presentation and a lot of the questions. Some more questions that are unanswered. Probably we can do it a bit later. But I really want to discuss one topic that was actually the first question here is, what is the adoption of chatbots during this pandemic? And is it helping companies to respond faster to their customers? Who would like to start?
I'll comment and say I think it's a mixed bag for organizations that some of them we talk to. Some either have the money and the budget and they know what they're doing and they're not as impacted by COVID. Other companies are like freaking out that their customer base is changing, their organization is changing, and they're like, what do we do about this? And they for example put hold on a whole bunch of projects, including bots. But there are other companies, for example, they go, no, we know what we're doing. We're not as impacted, or we still got to do the job at the end of the day. Let's crack on with it. So it varies from what I've seen.
Yeah, what I noticed that many companies currently in kind of a panic mode, and in panic mode they don't do anything. They just stop any optimization things. Though, like clearly, the chatbots is one of the things that should be used during this time, because it allows you to scale the 10 times or 100 times more questions than you would otherwise do. And during the pandemic, this is the case. The only problem is to overcome this current panic mindset and start to think about what actually can be used. And I expect maybe in 1 or 2 months, this topic will start to be more and more important while people started to come back and understand the realities of this one. Yeah. Who else would like to?
So Pavel, this Nick this side, and to your point, yes. So from our perspective, I've seen the adoption of chatbot deployment increasing, and that's more for organization internally to take the load off their HR and their training staff, because these times where the workforce are not uncertain in terms of what protocols they need to follow across diverse landscape, they have actually readily deployed chatbots with a canned set of thing. Otherwise, the HR team is just under tremendous pump. So I've got active, I think, about 3 different use cases in Australia across mining sector, across heavy metal utility side, where the bots have been deployed, where associates can actually use them over the phone. Push notifications are coming on through the bots. They can interact and henceforth. So yes, so there has been an adoption, at least from where I've seen it.
In HR area, that's interesting. I hope it's not the bots who can furlough employees. Yeah, crazy. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Who else would like to share?
We're doing a sentiment analysis of correspondence around COVID-19, and we're seeing a lot of travel and tourism, restaurants, and tech companies pushing responses to chatbots so that they can offset call center pressures. That's the biggest thing, and they're actually actively sending out emails to do, to encourage users to do that. So that's increased dramatically over the last 12 months.
I see. I also saw in Singapore, I think one of the government organizations wanted to deploy a chatbot that can help, with mental health, to cheer up some people, maybe to identify if they have some of the challenges. So it's I'm not sure
Across
how.
the world, a lot of governments have implemented at least basic chatbots to provide information on the COVID-19 response from the government side, or other information as to how many people are affected in that area, what kind of precautions need to be taken, etc. Including even in Australia, we have seen Australia government WhatsApp channel, right? I think that is a basic chatbot as well, which operates on limited inputs. Yeah, but from the other perspective, if we look at industries like insurance or health, where people are actually calling with their problems, such as, I lost job, what do I do? Or I cannot pay my insurance premiums, what do I do? In such cases, if we have bots, it actually adds to the people's dissatisfaction rather than giving them compassionate help. So I would say it's a mixed thing taken by the industry, where you just need to provide information which is not necessarily related to their personal problems. It's just news kind of thing or precautions. Then it is good to have a bot. But in case of people needing help, it's always better to have that human touch. So a lot of companies are holding back on that perspective as well. That's my observation.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Anybody else want to share? Okay.
No, I was just saying, I mean, there's quite, I mean, there's quite some discussions with chatbots in regards to the whole COVID-19 part. Obviously we're a chatbot vendor, so we get a quite a number of discussion, and there's some projects which have been obviously put on hold because of COVID-19 in budgets, but we also get obviously more requests of people wanting to build chatbots that help with that. In the long run, we currently assume that obviously this market will grow in regards to COVID-19, because the whole part of automating and being able to capture, to reduce load on the contact center and reduce reliance on human staff is definitely coming. And we see the same thing of people moving back contact centers into Australia because they had troubles overseas, because their contact centers are getting shut down and people physically just can't, the agents just can't get there, and they don't have the ability to work from home. So it's there's a bit of, it's an interesting chaos at the moment. Yeah, that was just my 2 cents to it.
Okay, thanks, Bora. Okay, I think we'll end the official part. I'll just switch off the recording and then we can just have a free flow, and there are a few other questions that probably guys can answer. Thank you everybody for joining us. I hope it was useful for you. I think all results are quite good, so hopefully we'll do something similar soon. So thank you guys. I'm